Rob. I'm back with another build. I'm building a Sandcrawler from Star Wars Episode IV. This is a Randy Cooper kit, and it's pretty big. It's going to be about 26 inches. Not sure how wide. Probably about, I can tell you. Looks like about 7 or 8 inches wide, at least. Probably more than that. More like 10 or 11. Pretty big model. It's pretty much all the parts are laid out here. Looks like a lot of the parts are for the tracks, and the major components for the crawler itself are pretty large. So it looks like it's going to be kind of like a building like a house kind of situation. So you're putting on walls and straightening things out, and doesn't look too bad. Looks like a pretty straightforward build, and not a lot of small parts. So it should be pretty easy. I don't see any major trouble. Might be some problems getting parts to fit, because I looked at the instructions, and he does provide you with a whole DVD of CD or whatever of pictures to take you through the build process, which is really valuable, because he shows you, where things can be a problem and where things need to be, heated with hot water and bent, and where all the parts go, which is the most important thing. Like I said, there's not a lot of small parts, so there's not going to be a lot of guesswork as far as where things go. I can kind of figure out by just looking at this thing how it's sort of going to go together. And there are some supports from the inside. I don't know if I'm going to have to bust out like 4x4s or my nail gun, but I think this should be pretty solid when it's all done. So that's what I have so far. I took all the parts out and I washed them down. Right now they're kind of just sitting around drying because I had them outside, but it's not as warm as I thought. So I brought them back in here to dry up. I don't really have to wash these parts. I talked to Randy Cooper once, and I did ask him if he uses a mold release, and he doesn't. So I didn't really have to scrub these down or anything. I just wanted to clean them off, so I know I'm starting from a good surface. And a lot of these parts are going to be sanded anyway, but I like to clean them all off first. Looks like there's a lot of cleanup work to do, so if you have access to a table saw, or a table sander, like a belt sander, that's what you're going to need for this, unless you want to do it by hand, which you can if you feel like it. If you don't feel like making a huge mess inside, or you don't have the room to do it or whatever, you can certainly clean these up by hand. It's just going to take a lot longer. I'm going to have to use the belt sander for a lot of these parts just to get a lot of the flash off, the excess resin, just so stuff lines up right, and so I'm not hacking away at this stuff with like a hobby knife for hours at a time. Actually, there's a box here. There's a box here that I got. I don't even know what's in it, so it's going to be like Christmas. This is another box that I got with the kit. I'm not even sure what's in this, so we're going to find out. Oh, tracks. So he put the tracks inside a padded box so they don't get messed up, and it looks like he did some work on cleaning these up, so these aren't really that bad. Apparently there's some major issues with the tracks, which are like tank treads, and getting in between them to clean all the resin, and it takes guys hours to do it. But it looks like he either improved his process or he did some work prior to sending these, because they don't look that bad at all. I had planned on spending a lot of time cleaning these out, but it doesn't look like they're that bad. So that's going to save me some time. And I think there should be 8 of these. I think there's 8 total. Would make sense because there's. I think that's all that's in here. It looks like they're all in here. So yeah, that's what I got. So what I'm going to do is build this thing with lighting. So I'm going to light up the control room, the little side doors, the bottom of the transport with the floodlights where the entranceway comes up, and also the headlights, the spotlights in the front. I'm going to put those on. So it's going to be fully lit and fully painted and detailed and weathered and everything. So that should be pretty cool when it's done. So I'll video as much as I can of the process and what I do to build this thing. So hopefully you'll check it out. And let me get to work. Alright, so it's the first step, put the engines together. So the engines go in, this is the engine compartment, and there's a left and a right engine. And they go in just like that. The only problem is they don't fit. So something is preventing them from fitting. You can see this part is actually hitting up against that part. So they're actually too big to fit in the slot that is provided. So I have to trim underneath here so they'll lay flat. It wouldn't look right if they're not flush. So they should be sitting flush against this back part. Fun stuff. Yeah, I got the engines in. Some minor minor adjustment on the side, but they're seated and they're in. The engines are seated, but they're not glued in yet. I did cut off the errant piping. I'm going to replace with some. I have some styrene piping here. And I'm going to replace all that stuff, and I'm going to actually extend it a little bit so it looks like it's kind of intricate and going around the engines. So this piece is the corner, the back corner, like the back end of the crawler, and these pieces go together like this. And this is basically all your engine detail in one place. So I'm going to actually connect these two pieces with resin, sorry, epoxy, and so I'll have like a little built-in shelf where I can work on this detail on the top and the bottom. And I don't see any harm in putting these pieces together now, and that way I could finish off this seam and kind of join everything together, and I can fix this part too, which is messed up. It was cracked, and then it looks like they glued the piece back on, so that's all half-assed. I'll have to fix that because that's a very prominent piece in the back of the crawler, and you're gonna see it. So that's not good. That's got to be fixed. Also, if you can see, when these pieces go together, and this is typical, I guess, you know, if you've built garage kits, you know this. They don't go together perfectly, so I'm going to, and he says in the instructions that these engines should sit flush against this top piece. So I'm going to hit this with a heat gun and for a couple of seconds and kind of put it down on a flat surface and make this so it's totally flat. It's just buckled a little bit right here. As you can probably see, that these pieces aren't meeting up perfectly, and it looks to me like, and I have to check this, but it looks like this is going to be the visible part of the model. So that needs to be look a little better than it does. So that's what I'm doing. I'll come back when it's all nice and pretty. One more thing I forgot to mention. If you work with resin kits before and you're familiar with these things, then you know that CA glue will work very, very well on these, unless you kind of hit it on something or whatever, because it's brittle. So I am going to use a 2-part epoxy, which is very cheap, and very easy to work with. This is stuff you can get in any hardware store here in the U.S. Anyway, it's like $15 for both of these, and this is 4.25 ounces. This lasts a pretty long time, and I use this on a lot of stuff, and it's very, very strong. So I'm going to use it on the engines, just to put those in, and to join these two pieces together so they're nice and tight. And I'm going to actually put some on the back when it's dry, so there's no chance of this like breaking unless something drastic happens. And the reason I don't like using CA glue a lot of times is it runs and you get it in places that you don't want it, and then you have to take it off with acetone, and it's just a pain in the neck. So I don't use it for the larger parts. I use it for the smaller parts, and I'm usually very careful with it and not using too much of it, because it can make a real mess, and then you have to clean it up later. So save myself a little work. So this is what I'm using for the majority of the model, and other stuff that I use I'll show later on. Just wanted to show something I'm doing on the top of the engine compartment. This is 2 pipes that in the instructions he actually does tell you to put in, and I used a styrene, it's like a half round, and I made a piece that looks like this. So I took 2 pieces together, and then I left a gap here so when I sit it on, it fits. And I'll fill in, there's some gaps where it joins up with this piece. I'll fill all that stuff in later on. I'm also going to put some piping in here. You can see where some of these pipes come out and then stop. I'm going to probably join those up and kind of run. I'm not going to go crazy, but I'm going to put a couple of different pipes in here, and I'm using a scribing tool to accentuate these. There's like some grooves in here that he put like slices in here, but they're not very deep. So when this is painted and detailed, they're probably going to disappear. So I want them to be a little more prominent. So I'm just going through and I'm putting this scribing tool right in that groove. So I'm creating a channel in there that's going to be a lot more visible. It looks like there's actually pieces going around here, and I'm going to try and get some in here too. It looks like there's some there, but I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get the tool in there or not. I'm just kind of clearing up some of this detail. I have to say that overall this kit is cast very well. There's not a lot of issues and obvious mistakes or anything like that, so I'm pretty happy with it. It doesn't look like there's going to be major problems with any of the detail. It looks pretty clean. So aside from the issues that I mentioned, I think it looks pretty good so far. A lot of the small detail looks good. And all of these pieces here are all even. There's no bubbles in there. A lot of this railing and stuff. It's just like some of the smaller parts that I was not too happy with. And it looks like the way this piece is joined together, there's some gaps in here. So I'll end up filling those in too. And I'll show you that later. That'll be before I actually do any painting. But so I'm doing some more detail. I'll show you what it looks like when the detail is all finished. And I did fill in this part here with I use this is squadron putty, and this works really good on resin. So I'm using this to fill in some gaps and cracks and other stuff that I want to clean up. That's it. Yeah, I got the back section on the engine section on in between the 2 main pieces of the structure, and it's kind of sandwiched in between these 2 pieces. It fits in, and then you have to bend the back piece a little bit to align with the sides. So a lot of hot water in that area. I just kind of bent it into shape, and that seemed to work. So I got this whole pieces together. It's not 100% glued. I did a lot of cleanup work on these parts. I don't know if other people had the same issues with, you know, the amount of resin on the kit, but you have to remove a lot of resin. There was, for example, on this side piece right here, there was about a ½ inch of resin, quarter of an inch of resin on the bottom in parts that I had to sand away with a belt sander. I have like a stationary belt sander, and I brought that outside, and I was able to clean up all my parts, taking a lot of resin away. And you could probably make a snowman with all the resin I had out there. So, you know, I had to wear a mask, and it was tedious work, but I made sure that I didn't mess any parts up. But even this bottom piece, you have to take away a lot of the resin on the bottom. I guess he pours it, I guess, upside down, so there was a lot of resin on the top, which would have meant the tracks that attach to the bottom of this, the treads and the structures that hold the treads, they wouldn't have sat right on this, so it had to be flat. So I went to town on that with the sander. Got all the rest of the pieces cleaned up, and the tracks, the treads, kind of tank treads, these apparently are a source of frustration with a lot of people. I guess they don't have the tools to get them cleaned up right, but if you do it by hand, I have no idea how you would do any of this. If you just had a hobby knife or a chisel and some sandpaper, it would take you a long time. You need power tools. And maybe some people do it. I have no idea. Maybe if you were on like a deserted island and you had an endless supply of X-Acto blades, and you know, you could just chip away at this thing little by little, it would take you, just to do the treads alone, I mean, days and days. What I did with these was, there was a piece of resin on the bottom to hold them together in shipping. I took and Randy does a video on this. There's a YouTube video on how he does it. And he took the belt sander and he kind of ground away the resin, which is exactly what I did. And he used a belt sander, or not a belt sander, he used a what do you call it, a belt saw? Band saw, sorry. It's a band saw he used. And he, you know, put the piece in the band saw, which I guess you could do. I don't have a band saw, so, and it wouldn't have been easy because you had to do both the top and the bottom at the same time, maybe. I'm not sure how he did it. I used the Dremel. So I used the Dremel with a cutoff wheel. I have a couple of them, and just a cutoff wheel, and I took my time and I went through and zapped each one of these gaps in here, and it was easy. I mean, I think it took me maybe an hour to do all 8 of these to get them perfect, and they're in good shape. I only cracked one of them and I could fix it. So that's what I did with the cleanup work on that. So the next steps are to put the supports on the inside and the front section, the top, but before that I have to do the detail inside. So I mean, it's progressing. It's fun stuff. It's like sort of like shop class instead of building models, but it's been fun using a lot of power tools. So that's where I'm at right now, and I'll come back when I have more building done to show you, and more progress. So see you then. So to secure the actual model interior, there's 2 supports that go in. They're square resin, and they slide in. There's these slots that hold the part in place, so it supports the model here and here, which is good, because, you know, then there's not going to be any play in these walls. The problem I had, I don't know if everybody else did or not, but these supports are, of course, they're made of resin, so they're not straight. They're warped. I could easily fix these by putting them in water, but that's really not the only problem. There's a lot of excess resin in these channels, So I did clean them out with a Dremel, but they're still too thick to fit in that spot, and they don't quite fit right, and I didn't feel like shaving more of this down and then shaving this bottom piece down, because that's too thick. I didn't feel like doing all that work. Plus, I don't really trust these things, so I'm making my own supports, which is identical. It's basically an identical part, but it's stronger. It has a center post, and it's just, I 3D printed it. So I just designed it real quick, and I copied the original piece, so it'll fit in place. It'll be totally straight, and these are really strong. I don't have to do any kind of modifications to them because they fit perfectly. So that's what I'm going to do with those supports. And if you do build this, I didn't get this from the directions, but put this one in before you put the walls in, because I'm going to have a hard time getting it in there. The directions didn't really, they weren't really specific, but that's okay. I mean, I can get it to fit in there because I did not glue this part of the wall yet. This centerpiece is attached with epoxy, so I'll have to rig it so I can get it in there, but it'll go in. It'll just be easier if you do it prior to gluing these walls in place. Just to learn from my mistake. So once I have those supports in, then I can start building the rest of the model and the interior, because I have to put in some parts here and here. So that's what I'm doing right now. And I'm cleaning up this back part. There's still some areas where you can probably see some putty on there. There's still some areas that I have to fix that are just alignment issues that were pretty much expected. Well, I'm waiting for some stuff to dry on the model, let it sit, so I thought I'd get a head start on these treads. So I'm cleaning up each piece. There was some minor resin flash around, and I had to sand down some areas, and pretty nice design. He has these pieces going on either side of this middle piece, so you end up with three pieces kind of sandwiched together, and then the tread basically fits over each side, and then this connects to the bottom of the model. So there's a lot of detail on these, so what I'm doing is I'm cleaning them up and sanding them down, making them all cleaned up, and then I'm attaching, so I have one solid piece, and then I can fix all the seams in here and clean everything up. So I'll have 4 of these. So there's 2 treads on each side. 2 in the front, 2 in the back. And there's 3 pieces for each one, so that's 12 pieces, actually 9 more that I have to clean up. But that's fine, because there's a good football game on, and I'm going to clean the rest of these up. So I'm going to end this first part here, and I'll come back when I have more done, of course, and show you what I'm doing next. So stay tuned for the next part. See ya.